White House officials and lawmakers on Capitol Hill have resumed talks for a coronavirus relief package. Democrats say the meeting was productive, but both sides remain split on several issues. Skyler Henry has the latest.
President Trump says he is directly involved as talks on a coronavirus relief package resumed on Capitol Hill between his team and congressional Democrats. After signing an executive order prioritizing the hiring of American tech workers, the president accused the Democrats of stalling negotiations over state and local funding.
They're slow rolling it, and all they're really interested in is bailout money to bail out radical left governors and radical left mayors.
We think we need a much fuller, stronger response by the federal government to get out of this mess.
White House officials tell CBS News right now they are narrowly focused on getting an agreement on enhanced unemployment and eviction relief. Those benefits expired for millions of Americans last Friday. The Democrats want to keep the extra $600 weekly unemployment payments, while Republicans want to slash those payments to $200 weekly before phasing them down even more.
Millions of people in our country are concerned about being evicted. Tens of millions of people are unemployment insurance. The way we can correct so much of that is for us to defeat the virus.
Sources tell CBS News while the White House prefers lawmakers reach a deal here on Capitol Hill, White House officials are advising the president to take executive action on COVID relief.
I have a lot of powers with respect to executive orders, and we're looking at that very seriously right now.
Meanwhile, the White House has instituted mandatory COVID testing for employees across its campus. Some are calling on Congress to ramp up on-site testing as well, after 2 lawmakers tested positive last week.
And Skyler Henry joins me now from Capitol Hill. Hi there, Skyler. So on Sunday, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows said the White House and lawmakers are, quote, not close to an agreement for coronavirus relief. Where do negotiations stand now, and what key points are they still divided on?
Well, hey, Elaine, good evening to you. Well, what we know is this, that negotiations are done for the day, but top congressional Democrats said that today there was a sliver of optimism, if you will, in terms of what was discussed between them and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, as well as Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Still, though, both sides say that there is still a long way to go in terms of settling on some sort of agreement for this next round of coronavirus relief. But what was significant, I would say, is that Speaker Pelosi did say that what the two sides spent a majority of the time today talking about was properly funding the reopening of schools. Obviously, this was a big point that members of the GOP wanted to put in their relief bill, getting kids back in actual classrooms and not in a virtual setting. And so Speaker Pelosi said that the two sides spent a significant amount of time going over the details, going over the dollars, and just trying to figure out how it all makes sense. But still, though, where there is division, as you saw in the piece, is where we're talking about the unemployment insurance benefits. Obviously, the Democrats want to make sure that there's that $600 a week that still goes out to families, but the members of the GOP still want to slash that significantly as well. So that's really where you're seeing this level of division here. And then you also have to think about this as well. Members of the GOP just want to work on this extension to make sure that they're helping out those that are unemployed, as well as making sure that they are doing everything in their power to make sure that people aren't evicted. Obviously, that ended in terms of the moratorium last week as well. But Democrats are saying this. They don't want to piecemeal this bill. They want to make sure that they have everything in it all together, because they feel as though those are two of the more significant bargaining chips as they try to negotiate between the two sides here. So what remains to be seen is what progress was made today, and will we see something happen on this coronavirus bill either this week or next?
So as we saw in your piece, Skyler, White House officials are advising the president to consider taking executive action on coronavirus relief. What kind of action could he take? And is the White House preparing for the possibility that a deal is not reached?
Well, officials are advising the president that it may be time to consider taking an executive order, at least as it pertains to the eviction moratorium, and try to help out many of the Americans who, the tens of millions of Americans who may be suffering from that. We're talking about some 43 million or so. But the president did address it in his press briefing not too long ago, and he said that he is looking into the idea of that. Again, a lot of people have been saying, hey, it may be time to look into it. It isn't necessarily clear what he can do without Congress's help in terms of making this happen, but he did say that he did want to address it. But as I said before, this is something that members of the GOP want to include as well, because they feel as though this is something that Americans need right now, and then everything else in terms of the negotiating for getting more money to local and state governments and those things like that, that could be negotiated later, but they want to make sure that money gets out to not only help those who are unemployed, but to make sure that people are able to stay in their homes here, Elaine.
Let's turn to the public health aspect of this. Task Force Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx says that the coronavirus is, quote, extraordinarily widespread. Now, President Trump later tweeted about her, and he used the word pathetic. So, Skyler, why did he take issue with Dr. Birx's warning? And how do her comments line up with what other White House officials are saying?
Well, to be clear, it differs from what we've heard all along. Obviously, the president has tried to have a level head as it pertains to the spikes of the coronavirus across the country here. But what we did hear from Dr. Birx is that what we saw in April and March is not what we're seeing now, not only in urban environments, but in rural ones as well. And so she is urging people from a medical perspective to wear those masks, to socially distance. And if you're living in a multi-generational household, even consider the idea of wearing masks inside of a home as well. Now, where the president feels as though she kind of swayed away from the message, is he feels as though Speaker Pelosi has treated Dr. Birx badly. He actually did address that in the briefing as well, and he said that he felt as though not only did he treat her badly, or did she treat her badly, but also nastily as well. And he actually thinks that Democrats should be praising the administration's efforts in terms of their coronavirus response and the number of testing that's gone out as well. So that's where you're getting that difference of opinion and difference of message here, where you're starting to see a lot of the medical staff kind of come out and say, hey, listen, there needs to be more that needs to be done in terms of testing and in terms of social distancing as well, while the president has a different rhetoric here, Elaine.
Well, Skyler, in the midst of this, the White House, as you know, is conducting mandatory random coronavirus testing for employees. What more can you tell us about that effort?
Right, so that memo went out today. It isn't necessarily anything new, so to speak. Members of the White House team have sent out letters in the past saying that they are conducting random testing. This one just makes it mandatory, and anybody who refuses to do so, it'll be seen as somebody who refuses to take the test. But it is interesting to point out here that they are conducting this as several members of the White House have had positive results of coronavirus in the last 2 months. So there's that. Maybe 2 months ago, I would say there was a time where all of us who would go to the White House would be screened, getting our temperatures checked, and also asked a series of questions of if we had symptoms of the coronavirus. That stopped about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, so that stopped. And so now we have this still effort to make sure that people inside of the White House are tested, but much more randomly here. But still, though, it is significant just to show just kind of the levels of precautions those inside of the White House are taking to make sure that no one is positive for the coronavirus.
Finally, Skyler, we know the president brought up, or addressed rather, the topic of mail-in ballots at that briefing earlier. What did the president say about that?
Right. So he was asked if he was going to sign some sort of executive order to address mail-in voting. Obviously, this plays into the rhetoric that the president has had all along, saying that he feels as though if we start to shift our focus more to a mail-in voting or an absentee voting, that increases the opportunity for fraud or maybe some sort of foreign interference. He said today that there's a possibility of double mailing. He called the mail-in process or the universal mail-in process a disgrace. But this is something that has been relatively debunked by a lot of experts who've said that there really isn't that much of a difference between mail-in voting and absentee. Obviously, absentee is one ballot that you request, where universal mailing is something that is sent out. 5 states already have a universal mailing system. And so I think that kind of speaks to that as well. But still, though, it also talks about the level of pressure that is a lot of these voting experts will have to be under when it comes to the November election. One, to make sure that they have the appropriate number of ballots and an accurate number of ballots as well, and to make sure that they do so in a timely fashion. The president said that the USPS isn't prepared for that. He said that a few moments ago. So it remains to be seen exactly what happens here and just what the rhetoric will be moving forward as we continue to talk about this discussion between mail-in voting and absentee voting as well.
All right, Skyler Henry, keeping track of both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue for us on this evening. Skyler, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
All right, Elaine, have a good one.